After the success of the original 1995 cyberpunk neo-noir classic known as Ghost in the Shell, its director, Mamoru Oshii, took a break from the franchise. A well-deserved break at that, due to the immense popularity the film had gained overseas, becoming an instant classic in the West, and now considered the forefather for various science fiction stories around technology's influence on mankind. After its release, the Ghost in the Shell license was put into the hands of Kenji Kamiyama, who was freshly coming off Minipato in order to helm a new project with the IP as lead director. This led to a television series in 2002 dedicated to the more complex and lengthy ideas Masamune Shirow's original manga offered in Standalone Complex. Obviously, in order to not confuse audiences with its sudden character returns and visual changes, SAC was set in an alternate universe. Production IG once again also returned to the production of the show, and led to them and Kamiyama making a second season in 2004, and instead had Oshii step back and contribute mainly two story concepts for both seasons. Yet when Oshii was asked in 2004 during a DreamWorks studio interview what was necessary for creating a successful sequel in his eyes, he said, "I wanted to think more about what humans are exactly. Those kinds of movies tend to be either about a love story or about God, but I thought maybe there was another way of explaining what humans really are. I finally came to the realization that I could write about humans by using technology and animals." Although serviceable, this was merely a surface-level reply to why the sequel was even made. If looked into further, in particular into a book titled Stray Dog of Anime, The Films of Mamoru Oshii by Brian Ra, which I highly recommend you read for yourself, we are able to find out that Oshii, in fact, didn't have much interest in a follow-up to the original 95 film in the first place. Yet eventually he gave in to making a sequel due to Production IG's co-founder, Mitsuhisa Ishikawa, telling him that it would never be done if not for his involvement, demonstrating a sense of respect that is rarely ever seen in filmmaking, as having an entire studio deny any involvement in the sequel for one of their most successful projects for merely a director is basically unheard of in today's climate. And so, with the return of Mamoru Oshii as director, and Production IG's animation expertise at the forefront of this production, Ghost in the Shell 2: Innocence was released to the public on March 6, 2004. And it changed the game. In 2004, the original Naruto, One Piece, Bleach, Monster, Samurai Champloo, Inuyasha, the original Fullmetal Alchemist, Standalone Complex Second Gig, and Elfen Lied was either beginning to air or have been going for some time. Yet what all of these shows in their variously different demographics, stories, studios, writers, and animation styles had in common was their dependence on using two-dimensional digital environments. Yet Ghost in the Shell 2: Innocence said,
We don't do that here.
And instead opted to create entirely three-dimensional set pieces that lasted minutes at a time. There's this one clip that I believe summarizes Mamoru Oshii and in turn Ghost in the Shell 2's technical vision perfectly. By the way, I'll be calling the film Innocence from now on because it's just such a damn mouthful to call by its full name. Now the clip in question can be found on YouTube in a short documentary two-parter titled The Making of Ghost in the Shell 2: Innocence. In it, mechanical designer Atsushi Takeuchi speaks of a hefty scene in both runtime and content in which the film's lead protagonists are sent to a densely populated special economic zone to investigate on a lead they found on an ongoing investigation. You can likely guess which scene I'm talking about if you've seen the film, this being the festival parade halfway into the film's runtime. Takeuchi says Oshii purposefully had them give the people human spirit by making the animation team draw stretches to make people look like they are moving in slow motion, and even had a third of even the tiniest yet densest of crowds move because it would otherwise make it feel lonely. This was because Oshii, in response to his staff's protest, believed all this work gave the crowd a slight noise feel to it. These are only a few of the dozens of complex ideas that were previously never implemented into a finished theatrical anime release. Additionally, it gives you an idea that its director was a man of not just action, but one who spoke through his work. One who ultimately made the franchise's overarching theme of technical prowess a reality with this very film. The first-person perspective was unheard of in animation until that one scene in the convenience store, likely being inspired by the rise of first-person video games and Oshii's own interest in the Wizardry video game series. Furthermore, that very store took 10 months for the animation team to storyboard, model, texture, light, animate, and fully realize, even changing its entire color palette to signify and transition the change in story beats. This shootout convenience store scene is, as Brian Rod's book considers it, highlighting the fact that what the viewer is experiencing is a new way of looking at the world in anime. This sound, titled The Music Box, was produced and recorded by Kenji Kawai, the previous film's composer, and led the crew having to go to Tochigi Prefecture to record a session that evoked a sense of vast space that could not be done electronically. Even more so, the reason for the convenience store's existence in the narrative in the first place, this being a place at which Bato is able to buy a very specific type of dog food for his dog, led to that very same dog being painstakingly animated in both the way it moved and emoted. Toru Shinozaki, the CGI art director for Innocence, believed this canine was the most expressive character they had to animate within the film's entire story. Every single one of these technical achievements was made to service what made Ghost in the Shell such a compelling property in the first place. Whilst the original film's narrative heavily relied on Motoko Kusanagi's internal struggle and journey on self-discovery in a world densely packed with things that often stole that identity, the sequel opted to, as Oshii himself put it, tell a love story. No, I'm not talking about Twilight-type romance.
I am a killer!
I'm talking about the very obsessive love humans have for their own species. It's our obsession with the capabilities of scientific progress and its effects on the very way we live that helps this so-called love story end up being a story of human obsession. How transhumanism transitions into post-human ideas of what makes and breaks a person. Now, of course, there's also the very obvious underlying platonic care the film's protagonists have for each other. Yet even so, that love transcends typical emotional and physical connection, with Bato constantly seeking answers why, how, and what Major exactly even seeks or may have already found, and whether their bond will be questioned, broken, or perhaps even further enhanced. The adoration these characters have comes from the disconnect the previous film caused between them. Now, how Innocence explores the concept of self-adoration the human race has for itself is encapsulated in the characterization and materialization of dolls. Just like the original's evident use of taking creative ideas from the original manga story, Innocence also mixes and matches one of Shiro's original manga stories. The film is inspired by the 6th chapter titled Robot Rondo, in which instead of Togase and Bato investigating a similar android crime case after Major's disappearance, Major had still yet to disappear due to her not yet having met the Puppet Master. Furthermore, it had characters that were renamed and somewhat more morally conflicting, such as the manga's version of Volkurson, named Kobanuma. Unlike Volkurson's more altruistic tendency to help kidnap children, Kobanuma merely did it for personal gain, only helping and sending out an SOS on the behalf of the robots in order to get with them in bed. Mind you, these are people kidnapped against their will, so it made the character of Kobanuma more morally difficult to side with. However, these two changes were either a natural progression from its predecessor or merely implemented to service the rest of the sequel story, as Major was obviously already gone and had merged with the Puppet Master within this film's timeline, and Volkurson had a daughter who happened to be kidnapped by the very company he was working for, called Solace. This company, Solace, is the main standout change from the manga when compared to the other two differences, as it too replaced the manga's original story's company known as Hanka Precision Instruments. But unlike the previous changes, Solace was an idea that originated from another work Mamoru Oshii was familiar with, and not only was the inspiration for the film's main theme of Ghost Riddle dolls, but also was a reversal of the source material's purpose of the Solace setting. It is one of the many incorporated innuendos Oshii used to bring the film's self-conscious gynoids to fruition, and will most definitely now require me to put up a brand new subtitle for this upcoming topic. Metaphors, metaphors, metaphors. From using classic French philosophers
You see Descartes.
to quoting the Bible.
As it says in the Bible, how great is the sum of all thy thoughts. If I should count them, they are more in number than the sand.
It almost appears as if Bato himself would have been a philosopher in another world, considering his obsession and knowledge is extremely similar to his predecessors. From start to finish, this film quotes various religious and philosophical works. Yet, what Stray Dog of Anime informed me of was just how much Mamoru Oshii loves his illusions. Believe it or not, Oshii originally wanted to be a sci-fi writer, and so due to his fascination with high science fiction concepts, some of the work he refers to as references for his own work happen to also be 2 science fiction novels. The first notable nod to these works can be found in the company name Solace and the robot models they produce, called Hadley Type. Now the name Solace originates from a 1914 French novel by Raymond Roussel, named, well, Solace. In it, the story revolves around a genius researcher named
Martial Cantorel,
who invites the narrator to his estate called the Locus Solace. Throughout the story, the narrator visits various inventions developed by Cantorel, some being for more practical uses, while others have a more artistic lens to their development. One of these inventions happens to be a method to revive the dead in the shape of a humanoid robot using specific substances and an electrical current. Now these are not per se people brought exactly back from the dead, as they are automatons that are meant to eternally replicate a set of actions they once did during their past human life. Rousseau classifies them as actors in the sense that the movements they imitate act as a role they are playing. It may at first seem kind of cruel for Martial to have such an invention. That is until you learn as to why it was even made, having actually been created to comfort grieving families by giving them a chance to once again see the loved ones they lost. Rousseau's story is one of the earlier concepts of the cyborg in literature, and was the direct reason for the Locus Solace within Ghost in the Shell Innocence, except instead of it being a place for people to seek comfort, it is turned into a place of financial gain and marketability. A place that kidnaps children and puts their ghosts into robot sex dolls in order to hopefully give them an incentive to be purchased. It is the innocence, see what I did there, of these very dolls that makes them a profitable object of use for Locus Solace. Another way of putting it is best written by Brian Raw himself, this being that it is an inverse of Rousseau's estate. It creates life by having to cause distress and pain, rather than relieving the grief of those who thought they lost that life forever. Now to speak on the other main novel Oshii was inspired by, Tomorrow's Eve by Villiers de l'Isle Adam, what a mouthful, was also a pioneer of another science fiction concept, this being the relation human beings had to machines. To summarize this story, it follows an alternate version of Thomas Edison, who develops a substitute android woman identical to a woman his friend is madly in love with. However, the reason why he created this android was in response to the original girl, named Alicia Clary, being too young and immature to have an intimate committed relationship with. A key line said by Edison when talking to his friend whilst giving him a reason to support this new replacement was that this android woman will become no longer reality, but the ideal. Edison is so confident in this idea that he even tells his friend to then compare the android with the original human version and see if he can even tell who is the real human. That it isn't the living woman who seems to you the doll. And guess what Edison calls this android he makes for his friend? Hadley. The same name given to the gynoids that run amok in Innocence. Now, ultimately Hadley does trick and make Edison's friend believe that Hadley is the superior version of Alicia, yet we soon learn that Hadley is not entirely built from scraps and the human mind alone, but rather that it too needs a living, active human mind to function, in particular by using the telepathic abilities of a woman who previously ruined one of Edison's friends' lives. Confident in his creation, Edison monologues to himself the very same opening text of Innocence, which reads, "I have come with this message. Since our gods and our aspirations are no longer anything but scientific, why shouldn't our loves be so too?" What at length Oshii gets across with using this novel is that both Hadley and the Hadley type robots require more. A piece of humanity, a ghost, in order to truly come alive. It's this very uncanny beauty that can be seen in their visual design, lacking the purposeful depth and wrinkles its human counterparts have, instead being so white that they almost glisten and glow in the dimly lit environments. These gynoids are a byproduct of mankind's attempt to twist what is not natural into its own vision, and in turn, it becomes the reality. There are obviously countless other inspirations from foreign works, such as the gynoid's visual design being reminiscent of 20th century German artist Hans Bellmeyer's doll sculptures, and how Villiers' own Hadley was the basis for 1927 Metropolis' female android, which successfully led to Mamoru Oshii then being inspired by that film's gynoid in creating who we now know and love as the Major, or how Innocence uses the Hebrew terms of truth and death to determine that every point of view is subjective and is vulnerable to falsehoods. As I said at the beginning of this section, this film is a rabbit hole of metaphors of some extremely meta hi-fi sci-fi concepts, yet I just can't cover them all. I'm merely looking into some of the many pillars of science fiction literature and how they came together to create Innocence. Yet being dedicated and devoting to all of these concepts doesn't always mean a work will inherently succeed. as what ultimately leads a work down the path of success is often its most valuable asset and also its most dangerous adversary. In 2004, Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence was nominated in the Cannes Film Festival, along with Fahrenheit 9/11, Oldboy, various other French and Korean works, and Shrek 2. Making Innocence the first and to this day only anime film to be nominated for the Palme d'Or, one of the most prestigious awards in all of film. Rightfully so, as in 2022, it is still one of the best looking pieces of contemporary animation. When speaking about Mamoru Oshii's films, voice actor Takenaka Naota, who voiced the character of Kim in Innocence, said that Mamoru's films are barely anime. Obviously, yes, they are animated, but they are to be considered adult dramas above all else. What Naota is trying to say is that it's like considering a book more than just a set of words, but rather a consistent flow of valuable information. I believe that too, and clearly so does everyone who ever worked with Oshii. So tell me, why the hell did Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence get stuck with tying with Shrek 2? You don't see Shazam tie with Parasite now, do you? So why should a change in visual format be the cause of effect of being considered less of a work than live action? Because according to film critic Jay Haberman, for all its graphic splendor, fluid action, surrealist attitudes, and self-aware cyber philosophizing, Innocence was indifferently received when shown in competition at the 2004 Cannes Film Festival. Was it a cartoon trying to pass for something real? The innocent pathos here is not that of cyborgs seeking to be human, it's of animated beings striving for life. You can call me a fanboy, but this is the best anime I've ever seen. Cartoons, animation, anime, whatever you want to call the realm of drawn moving images, seem to still be overlooked simply due to their visual presentation. It's a clear case of every generation being stuck in the past and unable to accept innovation. As most likely when you were a kid, you couldn't go a single day without being told that video games rot your brain. Yet now, video game award shows viewerships are hitting record high numbers, and Hollywood actors have joined into the voice acting craze, and even entire television shows and films have been made based on popular long-running video game franchises. It's difficult for new things to win recognition, says Oshii after the film festival. The reason is the love of cinema. The films loved by film lovers are films of the past, the ones based on films they saw when they were young. Whether they will like the films that will be made in the future is irrelevant. This line showed me how much it pains me to see an artist respect the art he so very much attributes his work to, yet not get the same respect back. It's a lesson on how important it is to be open-minded to change, otherwise you will be stuck in the past. Perhaps worse off due to your lack of faith in this new generation. Ghost in the Shell, specifically the original 1995 and its 2004 sequel, seem to be outside the standard otaku-oriented mass-produced isekai fanservice anime we have today in Japan. Because still, after over 30 years of its existence, Ghost in the Shell is considered less of a product and more of a contemporary philosophy. I guess I'd like to finish out this video by saying, if you have an interest in learning more about the works of Mamoru Oshii and Ghost in the Shell, then Stray Dog of Anime, The Films of Mamoru Oshii by Brian Ra, is an incredible read that taught me so much about the anime industry and its various productions. I'll leave a link down below for a few sources you can purchase the book from if you are in fact interested. I also hope I was able to do some form of justice to this often overlooked sequel, as it's been on my checklist of videos to make ever since I started this channel. Lastly, I can't begin to fathom how I keep growing even when inactive for my longest duration yet. Whether I continue to post frequently or not, this channel will always hold a special place in my heart, as it has helped me a lot to develop as a person, and I've been able to communicate and discuss a lot of topics that I've always wanted to talk about through the comment section with all of you guys. So yeah, just kind of wanted to leave that thank you there, and with that said and done, I have really nothing else to say for this video, other than
get the fuck out of here.